Okay.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Chair Olson, do you want me to start all over again?
I think we are going to start all over again. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Gwen, can you please take roll call?
Sure. Director Baker.
I'm still here.
Director Burris.
Here.
Director Case.
Here.
Director Diaz.
Here.
Director Foley. Director Mendieta Ramos.
Here.
Director Mays. Director Moore. Omakonde.
Here.
And Director Olson.
Here. Gwen, are we have compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes, Madam Chair, we are in compliance.
Great. So next is our comments from the public. We do have one person signed up, Melissa Frankowitz. Yeah, hot. It's the welcome seat.
So thank you for allowing me to address you today. My name is Melissa Frankwitz. I am the manager of child care services here at MATC. In keeping with the season, I would like to express my gratitude to the administration and the board for the continued support of our parenting students and for the additional focus that is being given to this population now. The education they receive here is life-changing for both them and their children. Tonight, I wanted to bring to your attention a concern regarding our Student Resource Center, specifically the lack of permanent funding for the positions of the Student Resource Coordinator and the Student Resource Social Worker. These positions are currently funded with soft money, which will expire at the end of the fiscal year. While the job of this institution is to educate, we all know that students lacking basic needs are less likely to be successful in their academic pursuits. The support services that our Student Resource Center provides are essential to the success of many of our students. Many of those students are students that I see on a daily basis. The Resource Center has flourished and expanded under Haley Weber's leadership as the coordinator. And Wendell and Romo's addition as a social worker has helped many students connect with community services that make their lives easier. At this time of year, when want and need are felt most keenly, I ask that you figure out a way to prioritize the permanent funding of these two positions. Thank you for your time. I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and joyous time with your families.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And just as a reminder, that the board is unable to respond to matters right here. However, if there's any follow-up that needs to happen from administration or questions that the board does receive follow-up and does follow up on situations brought to them. So thank you. Next, we have approval of the minutes from our regular board meeting of October 25th, 2022. May I have a motion, please?
I'll move approval. I'll
Thank you.
second, since Paul is not here.
You have to take that role when you're sitting over there. So, any questions or corrections on those minutes? If not, we have a motion from Director Baker and a second by Director Burris to approve the regular board meeting minutes of October 25th, 2022. All those in favor signify by saying, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's a voice vote, right? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the approval of consent agenda items. May I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Real second again.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions, comments with any of the items?
Yeah, let me check.
Yes.
Just one item, and I see our vice president of HR is online, and I was pleased to see some diversity numbers in our HR report taking up, and I think that's a great sign for us. So your work is paying off there.
trying to look for hands. I had stuff all over here, so I get like.
Well, I think people know, like, I watch those numbers like
Yeah.
every month, and it is definitely a good sign today that some of our efforts are starting to
Good.
blossom.
Good, thank you. Anybody else with questions or comments on those items? Seeing none, hearing none. We had a motion by Director Mendieta Ramos and a second by Director Burrows to approve the consent agenda items. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We will then move on to our board action items. The first one is our resolution F0252-11-22, which is authorizing the sale of $1.5 million general obligation promissory notes series 2022-2023 after the Milwaukee Area Technical College District Board. Do I have a motion, please?
I will move approval of board action with item 5A.
Okay, thank you. And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And Mr. Meehan is back.
Good evening, thank you. I've laid out for the board or handouts to walk through for tonight's meeting, and for those on Zoom, I'll walk through to point out a few things. The bid opening took place this morning at 9:30. We had given the notice, gone through the rating process, distributed the official statement. We're pleased that there are 5 bidders, which is, and I compare it to the last month when we only had 2 bidders show up. It's a quiet week. I would say this is probably the last sale of the week, even though the market is open Friday. We won't. No, I'm kidding. We're open Friday, but there won't be any sales Friday. There won't be any sales tomorrow. So this was the last sale of the week, which I think encouraged some people to participate. I think this is their opportunity. Huntington Securities was the winner at a 3.07. Jeff and I were talking just a few minutes ago. That's about 60 basis points lower than it was last month. So that's a real drop, which is great news. We'll see as it continues. TD Securities came in second. Sometimes they bid, sometimes they don't. But Fidelity's Capital Markets, they won last month. So there's some familiar names, but it's always good to see a variety of different bidders show up. But a 3.07 is a great bid. As far as the issue summary itself, the notes are dated December 7th. That's when the funds will be transferred to the district and the interest clock will start. The repayment structure is very similar to the last issue, the Series E, which is that it has maturities June 1, 2024 through 27. And the first interest payment is June 1 of 23. You have funds as part of the levy year setting for debt service to make those payments, but you'll also have premium for this issue as well. The notes are non-callable because there's such a short amortization, and the rating is confirmed at a AA1. In the back of the handout, there is a copy of the report. Save you the trouble. There's no difference in the language from the previous report. We'll see about next month, because when you have the audit become available, they may take it up at that time when they review the report, or they may wait till it's really finalized, approved, accepted by the board, and take it up in January. But I expect either the next rating report or the one in January, we'll talk about the audit financials more. But with nothing to say from the October to November sale, it's the same language. I'm just glad they had the dates right and they went from one page to the other. Once again, the true interest cost is the 3.07 with Huntington, the winner. On page 4, I have the overall financing plan. We're halfway through almost with the sale. The next sale is at the December 13th meeting, and we're tracking nicely with the overall financing plan and revenues available for debt service. As I mentioned, at the back of the report is the Moody's handout. What I've just covered has been included in the resolutions prepared by your bond counsel, and which is before you. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions for Mr. Meehan?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Can you give us a brief bonding education for those of us who are just not familiar with it?
Sure, I'll be happy to. In Wisconsin, the technical college authority is different than municipalities, different than school districts. And the technical college authority is that for projects of a remodeling nature, you can issue no more than $1.5 million per board meeting. That's state statutory. I've been in this long enough that I remember when it was $500,000. So getting it to $1.5 million is good news. Would love it to be higher, but it's $1.5 million that you can do per meeting. As far as your equipment borrowing, it's almost unlimited because it's percentage of your overall equalized valuation. Regardless, the borrowing amounts which are undertaken by MATC are determined by the board as part of your budgetary practice. Then you say, this is what we're going to bond for during the coming fiscal year. So what we do is we prepare an offering document, we distribute it to the world, we apply for the bond rating, and with Moody's, every time that you do a debt issue, they assign a bond rating. And they review your old ratings, and they could change your old ratings, but they assign a bond rating. We have a date, time selected, and at 9:30 this morning, electronically, the bids were submitted. That you're able actually to track, right up to the end there, the number of bidders that sign up. And all we know at that point is who signed up. And that's all the world knows is that, if they do, that people have signed up. And then people submit their bids. We were talking about it with my staff earlier on the way over, is that some people had their bids at 8:15, some at 9:28. Whenever they submit their bids, but we don't see the bid. And then at 9:30, they all appear. And that service, that iPrio, that online service, accepts the bids and says, based on the bid received, this is this is the order of the bids. What we do is we take those bids and confirm them. We run separate math to make sure they're right. They're right. There's not a mistake. This is all put into a program and submitted. But we do check their work to make sure the winner and the second place bid, are both right in their bids. Now, with approval, the board, what happens is before the night is over, I submit to a site that the MATC board has approved this sale at 4:15 or whatever the time is that the sale is approved. Tomorrow morning, if not before, one of our fine staff here reaches out to the winning bidder, Huntington, and says, you won, it's confirmed, and you need to transfer money to the district on December 7th. Here are the wiring instructions. This is where you send the money. And then we proceed to the closing. Is that helpful as far as the description? Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed over the years, we do short-term borrowing, so we pay off each one of these relatively quickly. You want to just give folks a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Your debt is structured very attractive for bidders and for the district, that we're able to issue a dollar amount of debt, and as Director Becker was saying, have it amortized over a short-term nature, 3-4 years, and keep the revenue available for debt service at a flat amount, year to year to year. And when we run the projections for this issue and future issues, we don't do it in a vacuum. We look at past issues. We say, we're going to continue to issue, not confirming you do it, but saying, we're going to issue $39 million a year for the rest of our existence. And the debt is structured with that in mind, so that every year we know this is the amount of debt service. So we're able to have that shorter nature. Can we go out longer? Yes, we can go out longer, but the interest cost goes up. We don't need to, because it's structured so nicely. Sorry.
You're muted.
And this bonding is just for equipment or physical building spacing?
This bonding is for physical building spacing. This is for remodeling work. Your equipment bonding we did in August. We typically borrow the money in August on equipment, and that's $21 million at that time, and that's for the whole fiscal year. And that's because your fiscal year begins July 1, but we typically borrow in August. So this borrowing is only for remodeling.
Okay. And do we bond for anything else?
No, I mean, some technical colleges might bond for expansion of the campus or something like that, but typically MATC does equipment borrowings and remodeling borrowings.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But any other questions?
Yeah, how often does our rating gets reviewed?
Every time we do a sale.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I would say that like this rating report, they reviewed it, but it's the same language as the last rating report, because we had no new information to give them. Yes, we had, an equalized value came out October 1st. Yeah, but we did that sale in October. The budget was approved in May. It's the timing. But when the audit comes out, there'll be a different discussion. There will be, I'm not saying a bad discussion, it's just more of an in-depth discussion because that's such powerful information for them to then delve into. So that report could be a longer report. I'm not expecting any change at all, as much as that becomes, the language may be a little bit different now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay. That being said, then we had a motion by Director Baker and a second by Director Mendoza Ramos to approve resolution F0252-11-22. This is a roll call vote. Gwen, could you please do a roll call?
Sure. Director Burris,
Here.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Diaz,
Aye.
Director Foley, Director Mendieta Ramos. Aye. Director Moore Umakonde,
Aye.
Director Baker,
Aye.
and Director Olson.
Aye. Thank you. Next, we have the resolution that allows us to go out to market for our next meeting, and that is resolution F0253-11-22, which authorizes the issue of $1.5 million, which we just learned is the maximum. General obligation promissory note series 2022-2023G in the Milwaukee Area Technical College District. Do I have a motion?
Okay, I'm playing Foley tonight.
Are you? Sure. I can switch off.
I was gonna say, I'll practice
I'll jump in.
reading that one off next time.
All right, I move approval of board action, item 5B.
Okay.
Second the motion.
There you go. We've got a second. So I have a motion by Director Baker and a second by Director Burrows to approve the resolution F0253-11-22. We need a roll call vote for this, please, Gwen.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Diaz,
Aye.
Director Foley, Director Mendieta Ramos.
Aye.
Director Moore Umakonde,
Aye.
Director Baker,
Aye.
Director Burris,
Aye.
and Director Olson.
Aye. Last action item.
Thank you
is
very
the-
much.
Yes, thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Sorry.
Thank you.
The next item is approval of the presidential evaluation instrument part A. The document is at your seat, and as a reminder, we already approved part B 2 meetings ago. So do I have a motion to approve?
Rhea, motion to approve.
Okay, Director Burrows, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Director Diaz. So just a reminder, this isn't in the public packet for obvious reasons. This is part of our board policy. This is part A to this. And if you looked at it, for those of you who were here last year for this, this looks like it's a little bit more reorganized. It has categories over some of those items, which is one of the things that the board talked about as far as that goes. And so I think those were some things that was distributed to be able to look at that, and items that we have previously discussed in closed session. So, but we need to officially approve this here. So if there are specific questions, remember, this isn't about the president's evaluation herself. This is about the tool, and I want to just make sure that we're talking about that. So if there were any questions on that, digital things or other things. Okay, seeing no questions at this point, there was a motion by Director Burris and a second by Director Diaz to approve the presidential evaluation instrument part A. This is a voice vote. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? I know we got a thumbs up. I think that's good. Okay, motion carries. We are ready to move on to reports then. So we will move on to my report here. So a few items to share tonight. Next month, December, which is right around the corner here, there are some events that board members might consider attending. The first one is our winter commencement, which has now been confirmed on Sunday, December 18th at 11 a.m. and it is across the street at Fiserv Forum. And then on Tuesday, December 20th at 6 p.m. is our GED HSED graduation right here at the Cooley Auditorium. So please make sure you respond to Gwen. There was also an email that went out for any regalia that you might need for that. Please do that no later than November 30th. It would be great if you could do that before Thanksgiving so she can make sure she gets that ordered. Those are both events, and I know many of you attended them in the past, and so hopefully we can get board members at both of those events. The December board meeting is held on Tuesday, December 13th. That is the second Tuesday of the month. Typically, we do it at the fourth Tuesday, so just a reminder because of the holiday break that we'll be back here very shortly on December 13th. So just a reminder for that. The Wisconsin Technical College District Boards Association Winter Quarterly Meeting and the legislative seminars held on January 11th through the 13th at the Concourse Hotel in Madison. So please let Gwen know if you are interested in attending that. And then the Association of Community College Trustees, the ACCT, the National Legislative Summit, is going to be held in person in Washington, D.C. February 5th through the 8th of 2023. There's still time to sign up for that. If you wish to attend, please let Gwen know. And so I guess during this Thanksgiving season, I'd want to thank the board members for all of your work behind the scenes. This isn't the only time I know that board members are doing work. Our faculty and staff for your commitment throughout the year, and to the college and its students. That timing was perfect, Director Foley, because guess what my last bullet is on here. I don't know if you need to catch your breath and we want to circle back to that, but it is around the bylaws. If you would like Dr. Martin to do her report, if you'd rather jump right
Whatever works for you, I'm happy to do it.
You guys decide who wants to go next.
Why don't I do it? I'll be very brief.
Okay.
So the status of this, we're talking about the bylaws for the Wisconsin Technical College District Boards Association. The status is that we have completed and vetted 2 drafts of these documents in the last 4 weeks. I owe them another one on Friday. The most controversial thing at this point has to do with the position of immediate past president on the executive committee. The executive committee runs the organization on a day-to-day basis, subject to the board. There's a president, a vice president, and a single person who is secretary treasurer. And then the immediate past president is a member of the executive committee. Having 4 people vote on things like compensation and recommendations to the board has been problematic in the past. It occurred to me that the reason for having the immediate past president was primarily to provide information and continuity, but that sometimes there's a reason they are the past president, which has to do with the board not really wanting them to be in charge anymore. So the proposal was to reduce the executive committee to 3 people, have the past president be an ex officio member, and all heck broke loose when that was proposed. As I was boarding an airplane, rather than continuing participation in the then 2.5-hour meeting, the others decided that they would increase it to 5 people rather than reducing it to 3. In light of continuing conversations about how do we reduce the expenses of the association and that the executive committee's expenses are compensated, it struck me as making no sense, but that's where we're at. So the timeline is the next draft will be done probably Friday of this week. The association is going to hire a legal counsel to do an official opinion about it. It will be recirculated to this board and all the boards in December and submitted to the association's board of directors for approval at the January meeting.
So Director Foley, do we need to formally take action or just give you feedback, or can you tell us a little bit about what our role is in that?
I am this board's designated delegate.
Okay.
And I am this board's designated member of the board of directors of that association. So essentially, I am supposed to take this to you, tell you what's going on, and ask for any questions, comments, or direction. you might want to give.
Would you anticipate then at the December 13th meeting that there would be, that we would provide you that?
I think that's the right timing. I don't know if the official legal review will be done by then. I rather doubt it. But what I consider to be the final draft, subject to that legal review, as I said, should be done by Friday and probably passed upon in the first week of December or second week of December by the bylaws committee.
Okay. So we could have that caveat even if we looked at it because our board meeting is earlier than normal, that pending final approval here and again, we're not voting on it, but if you're wanting to like, hey, we're good with that, or we understand our position or whatever.
Yeah, ultimately the question is, do you want to give me directions as to how to vote on this when it is submitted in January? Or do you want to leave it to my great discretion and wisdom? If I can find either of those at the time. But ultimately, this board as a body is the member of the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for Director Foley on that at this time?
So there's 16 members, right?
There's 16 members currently,
And then what, 5 on the executive committee?
5 on the
5
executive,
voting.
5 voting on the executive committee.
So if you didn't expense, I mean, if you didn't provide for their expenses, maybe shrink it to 3.
I would like to see that, and I would be in favor of posing that as an amendment in January.
Yeah.
But it would be better if we could reach consensus without that.
And just so that I understand, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So out of the 5, it's the past president, the president,
Vice president,
secretary, treasurer.
treasurer.
So who's the 5th?
Someone elected from the board of directors at large. I also suggest that they could just split the secretary and treasurer position into
Yeah.
2, which would solve some other problems as well, but that didn't go anywhere.
Okay, for clarity, we're gonna have this before December 13th,
Mhm.
like
Yes.
a draft of it, or do we review this after then? Guess I was a little confused about.
That's why I'm trying to get some
All
guidance.
right,
That's why I'm trying to ask
I
for
expect to
clarity.
have this, let's call it the semifinal draft, available next week, probably toward the end of next week. So I would propose that I get that from Glenn, and then it be on the agenda and you have an opportunity to read through it. It is not just bylaws, it's bylaws, policies, and procedures. We tried not to make any substantive changes to the policies. Procedures are still being reviewed. And you might disagree with some of the policies, but that's a conversation for another day. We chose not to try to change the substance of those. Our main goal here is to get the organization in compliance with the governing state statute. They've been out of compliance for over 10 years. To have that compliance in place before the next election of officers, which occurs in April. And the association only meets quarterly, so if we don't get it adopted in January, then we have to do a special meeting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to avoid all of that.
So I'm hoping you'll provide us, like you did today, which seems to be the more debatable things or things we should pay more attention to in that. And I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I trust your judgment on this, but it also just, I don't want to blindly. So I think that they're finding that balance of like letting us know that. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I can give you a cover that identifies the main issues.
Yep, that would be helpful for those of us who are trying to navigate that because that is our work here. So thanks. I think we were missing, there was also another announcement for board members on Friday, December 2nd. You should have received an email invitation from the executive director, Layla Merrifield, for doing an online legislative update at noon to 1 o'clock. So please reply to that. It was a calendar invite. I think Beth, it came from Beth, but it's there. So if you haven't replied to that, that is a virtual update with Layla at that time from 12 to 1 on Friday, December 2nd. So that's just over about 10 days from now. So please reply to that. And if you haven't put that on your calendars, please do so. I just look at my calendar, realize it's happening next Friday. So just for an FYI, as soon as you mentioned that, I'm like, wait, we have something coming up before our next board meeting. So thanks for that. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Martin for her president's report.
Hey, well, good afternoon, Chair Olson, board members, faculty, staff, students, and community. During the week of October 31st, college to assess the progress that we made. With
I
our
think they
teams
can't
working-
hear. Sorry. I don't think they can hear.
Can any of you hear?
Yeah, there was a brief lapse, and so I was
Okay.
just checking in with that.
Oh, thank you for that signal there, and thanks for watching the screen for me. So,
I'm not sure what you've heard, but we did have Achieving the Dream coaches here, and they met with our internal teams of faculty and staff. And Achieving the Dream is a national organization pathways to really keep focusing on student success and equity. We look at the data.
I think we have another ping, so I'm not sure if it's because we can't hear. I think the audio is going in and out, Chair Olson.
is it audio and video or just audio?
No, just audio. It's going in and out briefly from time to time.
Maybe ask if it's other members who are.
Correct. Yeah. Are all of our
Yes,
directors?
it's going out for me as well.
Yeah, me too. It just goes in and out.
If you put the speaker closer by, can you hear now?
I think it's
We
just
can hear you
now.
I also thought it was a technical thing. It wasn't necessarily volume.
It might have been me shuffling papers close to the microphone.
Yeah, it was fine until Dr. Martin started to give her update, and that's when it first started going in and out. So before that, it was totally fine. There was no disruptions that I heard at all.
So keep doing the hand signals if you're not hearing, because it's the only way we have of knowing that. So, okay.
I'll try the next part. So I want to thank Dr. Mannion and the team that worked on numerous data-driven projects that are linked to our strategic plan. And just thanks to the team for being available, getting the feedback from our coaches, and with the different insights that we've had. So it was really a helpful visit for sure. And then on November 7th and 8th, I attended the EAB Connected 22 conference, and that's where leaders from across our higher education receive information about student success research and learning best practices from peers. We were able to connect with our colleagues across the nation who are also doing Moonshot for Equity. We also got to hear about some national trends for higher education. There's been a national trend in decline in Black males attending college. Slight decline in females attending associated with childcare issues, less transfer from 2 to 4 years, escalating demand for mental health and well-being. And by the next decade, they're predicting a demographic cliff will intensify, meaning fewer high school students. And a big topic was employee turnover in higher education, 11 to 14% nationally, as well as mentioning that it's estimated that 6 million US working age population will be in decline by 2028, as will be a continuing challenge of where to find employees across the nation. A number of strategies were mentioned, like looking to other industries, changing job descriptions to include more competencies needed, attracting more students, of course, in the pipeline who have some college experience. We're doing many of these strategies. We also had this conversation with the presidents of the Wisconsin Technical College System, as well as our HERA, which is all the 4-year presidents and chancellors, about what is happening in our environment and how we can deal with that. I'm holding cafe chats in our cafeterias at each campus bi-monthly throughout the year. It's really great because I get to interact with students and employees, especially after the 2 years when we really weren't together very often. At Oak Creek, I know one student in particular talked about limited food choices and vending machine issues there, and I had a number of students and staff at Milwaukee as well. I'll be going to West Dallas and Mequon shortly. And last week, Tuesday and Wednesday, MATC hosted the WTCS State Board meeting, something that our college does every 4 years, and we rotate it across the state. As a host college, we were asked to nominate someone to be the Future Maker Partner Award and to receive that. And so that did happen. We nominated Brader Health and CEO Kathy Jacobson and her Senior VP, Chief Human Resources Officer Eric Humphrey were on hand to accept the award on behalf of Brader Health. And one of the reasons they got this is because, of course, they gave us the $6 million gift to our foundation to fund scholarships for underprivileged and deserving students over the next 20 years. It's the largest ever corporate donation to MATC that we've received. I think we know from all the articles that were in the paper that UWM also received it, and they would like us to work in tandem with MPS students and other students in high school to make sure that we have that pipeline built for students. And so working with the M-Cubed initiative, it's perfect. So it was a wonderful evening. Also at the state board meeting, we heard a very interesting presentation on dual enrollment that included our coordinator from high school relations, Stephanie Patty, and two teachers, one from St. Francis High School, who talked about the successful effort in graphic design, and one who served as in the role of dual enrollment liaison, who is the area content expert and mentor for these high school teachers. We also gave interested board members a tour of our campus here. We took them to our DEI office, to the Manufacturing, Construction, and Transportation Pathway, the Herbis Transportation Center, our Bacon Lab, of course, they had to have a sample down there. And finally, our Creative Arts Design and Media Gallery to see the Soapbox exhibit that was organized by our Social Justice Chair, Dasha Kelly Hamilton, who could not be there at that particular time. So our Dean of the City gave the presentation. It really took a small village to put this thing together and to make sure it was a successful visit. And I want to just thank all of our staff who really helped to make it so successful. And finally, Dan Breivik, Manager TV Administration and Planning, will serve as the new Interim Vice President, General Manager for Milwaukee PCS while we complete our national search for a new General Manager. Dan has served for the college for over 40 years. I said he beat me by 5 years, and has experience in many areas across the station. He will be addressing the board in just a few minutes to give his report. And that concludes my report. I wish you all a really healthy and happy holiday break. We have so much to be grateful for. Thanks.
There's just one thing in the report that I'd like to respond to, and that is the discussion of the macroeconomic decline in the demographic numbers that are affecting all the colleges. And this is a topic that the OECD, the Organization for Cooperation in Economic Development, I guess it's called, which is an international organization. Every 10 years, they publish a study on all of the major Western economies and predict which ones are going to have growth above or below the trend lines and what have you. And 8 years ago, their report said that there was only one country that could expect to have year-on-year average growth in excess of 2.5%, and that was ours. And there was one reason for this, which was we allow immigration and most of the others don't. So I think we should, as an institution, be thinking about 3 things that may be appropriate responses. Just want to get it out on the table and discuss it later. Not asking for a decision today. But one is, do we want to take a position on immigration, either into the state, encouraging immigrants that are already here to come here, or on immigration policy generally? The second possible reaction to that is full employment, but that's what we try day in and day out and never seem to quite get there. So I'm not sure there's much more we can do there. But the third is to recognize that when these kinds of shortages occur, that they are soon followed by labor shortages within the economy. And the typical response to that is further automation. And I think for us, that means we need to be looking at, again, our courses to make sure that we are upshifting training so that those jobs that are most likely to be eliminated by the next wave of automation are not the jobs that we are training people for today. That's easier to say in principle than it is to say with specifics, but I think that needs to be a focus going forward. Thank you.
Made sense to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Next is our district student senate report, and Patrick Casper is back. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa Olson, Dr. There's a word I'm supposed to use before that, Director. Lisa Olson, Dr. Vicky Martin, members of the MATC District Board and Administration. My name is Patrick Kesper. I'm happy to be here again with you this month. The Wisconsin Technical College System hosted WisCore DEI conference on race and ethnicity at MATC. It was widely successful and hosted nearly 200 students and staff from many of the Wisconsin technical colleges. Students participated in a caucus together to identify barriers to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at their institutions. After caucusing, the students were brought back together with employees to brainstorm ways to improve these areas at their colleges. Following the conference, the WSG governor of MATC and myself made a promotional video showcasing a few unique things that MATC has to offer, such as our culinary arts program, food pantry, and more. The video is to be posted by WSG in the future. At the recent district student government meeting, DSGA approved additional funding for future hospitality managed association and interior design organization for both of these groups to travel to impactful conferences related to their organization. DSGA will receive an outcome report in the future about what the students learned and achieved while on the trips. Oak Creek and Mequon campuses both welcomed 2 new student life coordinators. The coordinators have met with SGA and began engaging students in their new role. I personally am looking forward to working with the new student life coordinator at the Oak Creek campus in my roles to improve the student experience. In conclusion, well, prior to that, if you have any questions about what the students thought, I mean, you could ask them at the end of this report, or if you want to talk more at length, I have cards I could give out as far as what our concerns were as a student body at MATC with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility on things such as mental health was a big one. Just see me or ask. In conclusion, I want to thank you all for your time and the opportunity to present these updates and developments from the perspective of a student leader at MATC. I'm looking forward to continuing to meet with the board about any new concerns and developments students may have, as my confidence continues that this board concerns itself with any issues students may face. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Any questions or follow-up?
Guess I'll take your card.
Sure.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, like, there you go, thank you. I know, I'm sorry, you're behind me. We still haven't worked out the system. So yes, Director Maramokunde.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if what the confidence level of the students were there at that Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. If they thought that the university was moving forward in a positive manner, if they saw some steps being taken, and if so, in what areas, and what can we do to be more supportive of that effort?
So in the student caucus, students from each school that was present in the Wisconsin Technical College System were all caucusing together. So the concerns we had for each school looked different. And like I highlighted the mental health piece because after briefly discussing what the topics were, we split into 3 categories and caucused on those. And that was what I was caucusing on personally. Our governor at MATC also was in the same caucus. And so what I can take away from that is, as a system, all of the colleges and their students are facing different issues with each of these things that we discussed. And so that's why we all kind of individually as schools came back together and talked about what we faced. I would say as it applies to mental health and mental health resources, MATC is in a better position than some colleges, but I would not say that we are at the forefront or cutting edge. We're not in the pioneering state compared to some of these other schools. And just to back that up, what I would say is what I don't know much about is that we do have a 24/7 resource hotline, whatever you would name it, for mental health support. But as far as in-person counseling for any mental health or trauma related issues, we have, I believe it's still a 6-session limit. And I don't know if that's per semester or academic year, That was common among some of the colleges. There were also colleges where that was not the case and there was no limit. And just to speak from personal experience, because I like to do that and you know that, I went through some very devastating things last January, and I sought counseling for it. And being told with the gravity of the situation of what I was going through that I had basically 5 sessions after the initial session, it seemed like kind of a moot point, waste of effort, and did not further seek assistance through school. I personally am blessed enough to have outside resources, you know, an outside community and fellowship that I'm engaged in and have already been rooted and a part of, so that I was able to lean on a lot of people. I don't know that that's the case for most students at MATC. And then the other thing that we discussed that seems to be common among all 16 tech colleges, as far as most diversity, equity, and inclusion resources, and especially mental health, is that whether or not the resources are there, a much better job can be done at all the colleges and our school specifically of bringing awareness to the students that that these resources do exist. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And maybe offline we can connect. I know you have given Director Burris your card. She can share that information with me. Maybe we can sit down and discuss further how we can assist you and be of a help, especially around mental health. That's something that's near and dear to myself. So let's connect and we can have further dialogue about how it is that we can be best supportive on this board.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and could we ask the administration to give us, at a future meeting, more information on our mental health resources, and is there an opportunity for the college to be more proactive in what we're providing? I mean, we have just gone through a historically traumatizing, international events, and I know that we're trying as a college to provide support for students in many ways, but I think a little more information for the board to see what ability we have to be able to expand services or where we are with it would be really helpful. Thank you for raising those issues.
Hector, just to clarify, so was there a representative from all 16 campuses that were here at there, or were some campuses not able to attend?
So I wasn't involved on a secretary level of taking roll calls.
Sure.
So I do know that Moraine Park specifically had 3 advisors here, but no students.
Okay.
Every other college that I was aware of had a student. So I would guess close to 15 of the 16 schools. But yes, that caucus was in the mental health one alone. It was like 8 or 9 of us.
Sure.
It was like 15 of us, but it was 8 or 9 different schools.
I just wondered, because it's quite a distance for some people to attend from some of the other campuses and that's why I was just curious. So yeah.
And then just real quick before I lose my speaking rights, I would just say, like, kind of in essence to your question, like a report from administrators who know a lot more than I do is super important. But I would just kind of reemphasize the same point that I've kind of been bringing up is one really good thing is like having these online resources like this 24/7 thing. And I think that expanding those for further utilization and accessibility is important, but not at the cost of scaling back in person whatsoever. Especially for these more severe mental health issues or crises that might be going on. If somebody's dealing with the death of a loved one, severe health issues in their family or anything like that, I can't speak for the student body, but I'm not hopping on Zoom to talk about that. So.
I'd like to find out if there's any flexibility in the number of sessions that we provide them.
And I'm just quick, what were the other 2 sessions? Just curious because.
I believe there was one on inclusion and accessibility for persons with differing gender identities and sexualities. I cannot fully remember what the other 2 were for sure. It was a very, very long day, a lot going on. I had too many hats to wear. Because this is one of the probably 7 hats I wear in a week. So I could get a report on that and I could bring more information about that, but I just don't have that today.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so we can probably getting a comprehensive report on what services are available, because sometimes it's there, the communication sometimes isn't there, so I think maybe just getting that what's available would be a good starting point for us rather than trying to speculate right now, so that's good. Thank you, Patrick, for that report. Next, on your, I don't know, by your person here, I guess, is a hard copy reports from Eva, who is under the weather right now. So the DEI Inclusion Board updates, it should be printed there. So please take time to read through that. Our next report then is our enrollment report, and I'm going to be calling on Nicole Tanner for that.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time this evening. The enrollment report you should have received in advance for your review. And if you have any questions, we'll answer that. But I did want to highlight a few things from that report. I wanted to highlight the enrollment as it stands for our budgeted goals. As you know, for the summer, we achieved 106%, achieving that summer budgeted goal. Fall, we're at 97.48%, a little under the goal, but it hasn't closed. We're in that term right now. And as you know, last week we had open enrollment. So for the spring, we attained 1,282 FTEs at the moment, but again, it just opened last week. So we're having strides there already for the week. Year to date, we're at 70.10%. Short 2,482 FTEs of our goal. I'm hoping to increase that rather quickly. And I also want to update you on the next one, enrollment and the impact on revenue. Right now, we're down 163 FTEs based on our year-to-date budget projections. That amounts to $937,250 in lost revenue to date. And I just want to update that. Other than that, that is my report, unless there's questions for us.
Director Foley.
Just a quick question. So to get to budget, we need 2,482 more enrollees in the spring.
To meet our budgeted goal.
Is that a realistic possibility?
Absolutely. I believe this time last year we were at 3,492. So definitely an opportunity to meet that.
Is there anything else that you can do to help that happen?
For admissions, absolutely. And we're excited to do a couple of things. We're going to do we have initiatives doing by pathway. We're going to invite students in, the navigators, admission navigators are going to initiate pathway invites. So it'll be a spotlight for this week. It may be, I don't know, STEM. And all hands on deck will focus on STEM, invite students that have applied, or students that applied last year that didn't attend. It'll be all hands on deck. And we're going to do each pathway daily to increase that enrollment in order to provide specific attention to address questions that students may have on those specific pathways, and hoping that will help increase and we can address population at one time each day.
One last question, if I may. Oh, yes, please.
Also the Shakota scholarship.
Absolutely.
We already have, maybe probably at this point, 600 applications. Is that right? Yeah. Yep. And so, I mean, that's really a good pool of applicants, and they have to take 9 credits each semester, so that should help our FTEs as well. So we're very hopeful for that. And the first semester, we'll be able to get new students to come in. And then we'll have the continuing students. And so far, with the 123 that started in fall, we still have 123. So we're really hopeful.
My last question was, is there anything we're doing in particular, more that we can do to identify and recruit people who are already out in the workforce and coming back, as opposed to new students or students that already applied in the previous year?
That would be Tony.
I have a couple of things with recent employers that we've been speaking with. A couple of employers that are doing special programs that are even doing wraparound.
I think you have to make sure they can hear you.
A couple of employers that are doing wraparound support like we're trying to do with our students with new employees, because they're realizing people that they're bringing in that might be first coming into the employer at an entry-level position. If they don't provide the wraparound support from people with lower incomes, they don't see them retained. And so we're starting conversations with people about that could include advancing throughout the company with education. So we're doing a strategy with employers that's really identifying from the top to entry-level hiring managers, that we have relationships with them and that we're trying to better understand both, very specific opportunities for engagement to upskill employees that are there, but also how to better connect our students once they graduate. So it's really kind of a multi-pronged approach. And we're seeing some interest with large employers to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. Are we tracking the students that we already have and see if they've signed back up? Like, how are you tracking the retention portion? Like, so for a student that signed up for human services, for example, and they haven't gone through all of their courses yet, are we tracking that?
Yes, we definitely are tracking retention and seeing where they're dropping off. The retention coaches are reaching out to see where they are, trying to, before they leave, try to retain them if there's issues. But once they drop off, we do reach out to them and try to get them back enrolled in courses and help them overcome any obstacles that cause them to leave.
Right. And so okay. And so of the numbers that you gave us to date, like for spring, are those a lot of, I see here, no attained. Oh, okay. Are those any retained students? Can you tell from those numbers, or are
No,
those just like
not from that number, but in the report it gave continuing.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Well, continuing students. Okay. I think I located, oh, that's gender. So a little bit over 6,000.
Continue. She didn't put the spring yet. For
Okay.
continue, I'm sorry.
So just a
I
little
will
bit
make
over
sure.
6,000 for that one though. Okay. All right.
And because you just started enrollment last week, it wasn't added, but we'll definitely have it in December.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything else?
I think I gotta look all over here, sorry. I'm trying to-
Well,
I don't
thank
think
you.
so, but yeah,
Thank you.
Nicole. Next, we have our Milwaukee PBS General Manager's Report and Dan Broderick. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Olson, MATC board members, and Dr. Martin. During the month of October, Milwaukee PBS had 4 of the top 10 broadcasts among all PBS stations nationwide, including our local production of the Wisconsin U.S. Senate debate, which was the 4th highest rated program of any broadcast on a PBS station. Other broadcasts that made it into the PBS top 10 during October included 2 plays on Channel 10 of Masterpiece Mysteries and our broadcast of the Wisconsin gubernatorial debate, which came in as the #1 broadcast during October of all PBS stations nationwide. Our occasional partnerships with Milwaukee historian John Gerda continued with his People of the Port, a Jones Island documentary. It tells the story of Jones Island beginning first as an Indian village, then it became a French-Canadian trading post, was followed by a Yankee shipyard, and finally a Polish fishing village to what we all know it has become today. On November 14th, nearly 1,000 people attended a screening of the program at the Oriental Theater. And on November 17th, our premiere broadcast of the People of the Port program, which was up against the Packer game that evening, was our highest rated program on Channel 10 that day. And it was actually the 13th most watched program on any PBS station in the country that evening. October 28th marked the 65th birthday for Milwaukee PBS. Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson declared it Milwaukee PBS Day in Milwaukee. In addition to the commemoration by the mayor, several PBS personalities have recorded 65th anniversary messages, which we'll be using during the next year celebrating our 65 years of service to Southeastern Wisconsin. Some of the anniversary messages include greetings from PBS anchor Judy Woodruff, travel expert Rick Steves, and Chef Lydia Bastianich. November 24th marks the beginning of the December pledge period. The theme for our pledge drive this year is Celebrate Milwaukee PBS, and many of the 65th anniversary greeting messages that we have received will also be used during the pledge drive. Free will is an innovative idea in planned giving, and we are offering it as a service to the general public. It allows users to create at no cost a completely legal last will and testament. It also prompts you that if you so desire, you may leave an optional legacy gift to Milwaukee PBS in your will. Think of it as sort of the TurboTax of making wills. Free Will launched on November 2nd, and so far we have been informed that we have just over $1.7 million in committed bequests from individuals who have used this service. Letters to Santa, which is produced by the television and video production students, will be broadcasting December 19th to the 24th. It'll air on both Channel 10 and 36 at various times. The MATC winter graduation is scheduled for broadcast on January 7th. And on October 14th, the Milwaukee Press Club inducted two of our former colleagues, Liddy Collins and Denise Calloway, into the Media Hall of Fame. And Milwaukee PBS is honored to have 7 Midwest Emmy Award nominations this year. The Midwest Emmy ceremony is on December 3rd, and we hope to have some positive news recognizing our staff's hard work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Rainey online? Yeah. Okay. So next we will have our legislative matters report with Rainey Zelenkopa.
Hello, thank you, and good evening. I've highlighted in my report this evening on your paper copy or electronic copy all of the new information as I've tracked some of the items over the last few months. First, just a general state legislative report of most interest this week. November revenue estimates came out from our State Department of Administration. The DOA is estimating $6.6 billion surplus at the end of the current fiscal year. And in addition, they're projecting $1.5 billion in revenue growth over the next biennium, the 23-25 biennium. And so just as a refresher, the governor will be working on his budget recommendation, which he will introduce to the legislature in February. And then the legislature will need to work their budget process with the goal of having a budget passed by June 30th. There's no statutory requirement that that happens. And in Wisconsin, government doesn't shut down if it does not happen, but their goal is always to pass a budget by June 30th for the governor's signature. Just to put the surplus in some perspective, if the legislature determined as part of the budget, it passes, the governor's agency budget requests of for every single agency could be funded and then still have nearly $4.5 billion left in the general fund. So it will make the budget process very interesting in that there is obviously a lot of money that can be utilized to address a variety of different issues facing our state. So again, very healthy budget surplus. The governor will be introducing his budget recommendation in February, and then the legislature will work their budget process through June. The legislative leadership has been determined. And so we're looking at a very similar group of leaders across all caucuses, I would say, with the exception of the Senate Dem caucus. Due to retirements, there are a number of new faces coming in there. Senate Democrats will be led by Melissa Agard from Madison, and she just this week reappointed Senator LaTanya Johnson from Milwaukee and newly appointed Senator Kelda Royce from Madison to serve on the Joint Finance Committee. So those are two very coveted appointments. We'll see standing committees, the structure of the standing committees be developed through the end of the year. Committee chairs will be announced, and then members will be appointed to those committees. And typically, those are always determined by year end prior to session starting in January. Sometimes they're a little delayed, but typically the goal is to get that committee structure in place. As I've shared with the board in prior reports, because of the number of retirements. We have a number of new faces coming in the legislature, so it does really change the committee dynamic pretty substantially. We'll definitely be getting a new committee chair, chairing colleges and universities in the Senate, with outgoing Senator Dale Koenga retiring, and a number of other appointments will be up as well. Moving on very briefly to the legislative study committees that we've been tracking. The legislative study committee on increase or offender employment has released several bill drafts that the committee will have an opportunity to vet next session. One bill draft that is of particular interest will be legislation that would expand the current earned release program to allow eligible inmates to complete vocational training, career exploration, and other programming that then can be credited to the earned release program or as part of earned release. Currently, that is not allowed under current law. So that's something that we'll certainly want to vet and then monitor and support throughout the process. There are others as well, but this is one in particular I wanted to highlight this evening. And then for the study committee on occupational licensing, again, one we've more monitored, in that, there could be some positives, there could be some negatives coming out of that, potentially depending on what the bill drafts look like. It's a slate of bills, lots of different bills. This has been a very political issue, a very hot topic in the last year. So I expect both Governor Evers and the legislature to have some proposals in this particular space, but we'll be seeing things likely on, renewal dates, any efforts to reduce the length of time it takes to be licensed. But also, I think, it's fair to say that we're likely to see proposals that will either eliminate credentialing or change education requirements. Different review periods, for example, might be set to determine, the value. I know that definition is different for everyone of certain licenses. So this will be a very big topic, and I think political topic moving into next session on how to address some of these licensing delays that we've seen headlines on in the paper for the last year. And then I'll just share as my last portion, I included a list of all of the newly elected individuals, and you can see also on the document, the state Senate secured a veto-proof majority with 22 Republicans coming into the body, 11 Democrats, and then the Assembly fell short of that veto-proof majority, coming in with 64 Republicans, 35 Democrats. I highlighted individuals just very quickly based on kind of trying to look at our district and then the new legislative districts. So you can get a sense of some of the new names and some of the more familiar names of individuals we'll be needing to work together with and get to know a little bit better next session. Earlier this evening, it was mentioned that the District Boards Association, will have their lobby day coming up in January. So I'll be working with those individuals who are participating to schedule legislative visits during that period. And with that, I'll conclude my report and take any questions.
Such a problem. What do we do with $6.6 billion?
Yeah, really well.
Yeah, it will be an interesting budget cycle, that's for sure. I think it's fair to say that, everyone, we know where some of the main priorities will be. I think tax cuts certainly on the table. I think education funding will be hotly debated. And I also think shared revenue, funding for local governments, those three for sure will be getting a lot of attention. And I think will be the most difficult ones to address in divided government.
I truly appreciate the line in the report where you say, for purposes of the 23 to 25 budget deliberations between projected surplus and expected revenue growth, the state could fund every single agency request and still have 4.4 billion left in the general fund. Well, that would be easy.
Except that the question becomes, are you going to give that money back to taxpayers, or are you going to make investments now that solve long-term problems?
Okay, we'll debate the 4.4 billion. If that first, can we fund all the state agencies so they can do their work?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm good with
Maybe
that.
you and I ought to debate what to do with the
I
4.4
like
billion
that.
that's left over.
It's fun.
I was looking for you guys to just ask.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Director Moore Kunde.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You make this process sound so seamless when you talk about the governor's budget. I'm wondering if there are those who receive, you talked about occupational licensing. I'm wondering if there are those who are our students currently who would be moving to receiving occupational licenses from the state. If there is any advocacy on their part, or if there's any request to participate in advocacy for their professions in acquiring their licenses.
So how I would respond to that is, specific to the Legislative Study Committee with the slate of bills that are being proposed, and you'd be familiar with those having, currently serving on the committee. I think that there could be some positive moments. So to your point with student advocacy, one of the proposals being, I think, deliberated is, allowing for a preliminary credential for new graduates. And, I'd have to look back at the language and we'd have to vet it internal, but on the surface, that seems like a positive thing for students. It would maybe get them licensed a little more quickly. But you have, the devil's in the details, I guess, on that. So I think in the past, when we've seen efforts to reduce licensing requirements, I can think of an example a couple of years ago where the college didn't take a formal position on that. And of course, we have our own process to determine that. But there were opportunities to engage with legislators, to testify at hearings. So certainly, I don't know if I'm hitting on like the exact response you're looking for, Representative, but I do think that specific to this particular committee, the reason it's going to be very challenging is that there are individuals who want to reduce the training and education requirements and eliminate licensing. And then there are individuals who feel very strongly for the safety of the public, the value of their education and training, that there is good reason to maintain those licenses. So that's where the rub is. I think that everyone probably agrees on wanting to improve the speed at which an individual is able to get a license. I think that there will be differences of opinion in how that happens. Certainly there's some historical precedent that has been set over a number of years of not providing adequate resources to the agency to do the work that it needs. And so certainly those have been political moments. So that's what makes this challenging. So yes, I make it sound easy on paper and in a brief update, but there are a lot of dynamics that make this advocating in this particular space on this particular issue difficult. And so I think for students looking to advocate on something, I would say tell your story and meet with legislators to talk about the value of a license. And then if there are instances where legislation is being proposed that would reduce the value of your training, education, or licensing, you'd also have to advocate and tell those stories as well. So Representative, I don't know if I answered your question, if I went to the direction you were wanting me to go, but let me know if you want me to expand or back up on anything.
No, I think you did a great job. I think for anyone who is watching this live stream, it's really important that there are those of my colleagues who want to take a hatchet to occupational licenses. When, if anything, if there's some work that needs to be done, it should be done with a very slight scalpel, and they just want to do it the other way. What behooves those who receive licenses from the state of Wisconsin is that they advocate on their own behalf, because each license is nuanced, each professional is nuanced. There's 250 plus professions that get licenses, and folks are trying to treat them all the same, and they're not. And so I think it's really important that those, especially those who are our students here at MATC, that they advocate on their own behalf and for their licenses. And those who attended school here and now are practicing, advocate for their professions as well. Because just to create the understanding that we are not all the same, and that in order for us to do this work, it will require for us to have a very robust department and to ensure that our licensees are well served, if that makes sense.
And I would just add that if there are moments where a student, recently graduated, for example, struggling to get a license, certainly if board member or, a member of administration receives a call on that, we can provide some resources to help address those challenges and those issues. So I'll just share that as well. The department has been very responsive when those types of questions have been provided, when that information is provided for them to respond to.
Great, thanks. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
I want to look at the little yellow, put your hand up things that you can do in person. So I just, if we know, Director Moore-Mukundi, you're on this committee, our legislative consultants are sort of keeping an eye on this. If we know that there are going to be hearings, I think we can be just a little more focused on making something like that happen. We have advisory committees, we have industry professionals who we work with, that if there are some of these licensing issues that are going to be arising where we're seeing, and we've seen this in the past, particularly in healthcare, and it's been, it could have been potentially devastating, to our, graduates and future graduates. I think for us to activate our advisory committees, using sort of our network of graduates through staff here, we have done things like that before so that we could bring a group to come and testify, bring some industry professionals with. I think we just needed to be alerted to that and actually probably work with student government as well in doing something like that.
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, the next committee is actually on the next day that we'll have our board meeting here. It'll be in Madison on December 13th, starting at 10 a.m. But I also want to make sure that folks understand that we are not doing any legislative decision-making in the study committee, that it's just a study committee, that they will still have to go through the process of the licensing committee in the Senate and the Assembly coming up in the new cycle. There will be recommendations from the committee, but even then, I think that will be a good time to have dialogue about the nuts and bolts of what these look like. I think it's important to have an overarching kind of philosophical conversation right now, and then having the detailed nuts and bolts conversation starting in January.
I do think there may be even opportunities beyond MATC as the whole technical college system, right? If it's a statewide licensing thing, then more power in numbers to try to, as we talk with Layla Merrifield or whatever, what are they doing collectively for this? It's not just, there's more power in saying this from all the campuses and all those two can come in, and we can then pass that on here. So again, use power where there is power in that. And Ramey, as you work with those at the technical college at the state level, that's one of those things to keep in mind too, because obviously, not that we aren't strong enough, but obviously you can impact many more legislators if it impacts many more districts across the state too. So I think that there's some potential for doing that. So.
And just to add briefly to that, if I may, also professional associations have been monitoring, this special study committee as well. Some have testified, some have chosen not to testify. Some have prepared written remarks. And so I think that's another resource for, whether it be a recent graduate or to look to as well, that all of the various different professional organizations from, the healthcare space to the trades to, you name it, anyone who is licensed by DSPS have been, and if they haven't been yet to a certain degree, they will be very engaged next session as some of these proposals roll out. And again, I think, I would expect the governor and his budget to also have some policy and fiscal solutions specific to DSPS licensing as well.
Yes, also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Madam Chair.
Just saying, we're looking forward to the legislative study committee findings and then what that comes out of that and starting to be able to read those and then act on it. I think it'll give us some tangible pieces from which we can respond to a little bit or have a little bit more background in a document that I find those very helpful.
And also, Ramey, how do you pronounce your last name? I don't want to get it wrong.
It's good. Everyone slaughters it. It's Zelenkova.
Zelenkova. Okay, great. Because I'm kind of sensitive about that. myself. However, I want to make sure that if we need to talk offline too, that we can as well. And you have my information, so we can always do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for Rami at this point? Okay, thank you, Rami. Have a great break.
Thank you.
Next, under our reports, we do have some quarterly reports, and then we will have some annual reports. So our first quarterly report that we get is our audit advisory report. Director Mays is part of that. She is absent tonight, and so Jeff will sort of take on that piece of it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Martin. The Advisory Audit Committee met last week, Thursday. An external audit update was provided by Paul Franz, partner at Baker Tilly. The auditors are finalizing the financial and single audits. There have been delays due to confirming the data for the OPEB actuarial report and finalization of the single audit. At this point, they do not anticipate anything other than unmodified opinions, which is consistent with prior years. They did extend appreciation to the finance staff and their help and cooperation with the audit. An internal audit update was provided by Mr. Brian Kubik, Manager, Internal Audit. Brian walked through the results of the risk assessment conducted between mid-September and November. A review of financial aid will be added to the existing list of audits, which include reviewing Zanso pay for faculty and data quality at MATC. Mr. Kubik then walked through the preliminary results of the pay equity review. One high impact issue noted the omission of a comparison of job requisitions to be posted against the EEO job categories that are underrepresented at MATC. His procedures indicate that should a job fall into one of the underrepresented categories, additional recruiting efforts will take place. HR has agreed with the finding. The action will be taken by January to implement new steps and ensure this comparison or a crosswalk is completed, and additional efforts will be taken as needed. Mr. Kubik also walked through pay equity for fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022, showing comparisons by gender and race, and by position broken down by gender and race. He noted a Department of Labor study that used 2020 data that indicated females made 83 cents for every dollar males made. The comparisons for MATC showed that in some instances, white males were paid more, while other instances where they were paid less, but typically the differences were within 5 cents. Initial dives into the data seem to indicate variances could be explained by factors such as pay ranges within a position category and the percentages of particular job types within a category. Nothing in this initial round of review raised alarms that are a pervasive problem. Internal audit is continuing to dig deeper, but does not anticipate any issues to be added to the report. Regarding audit follow-up, 10 action items were completed during the quarter. This is the best quarter in several years. Mr. Kubik also reported that the committee was on pace to fulfill its advisory audit committee requirements as of 10/31/2022. Finally, Mr. Kubik presented a draft internal audit charter for the second review. The committee voted to adopt the internal audit charter. See if you have any questions.
Director Baker's going right now.
I know.
I think if she had one though, she would have stayed around.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any, but if there are any follow-up questions, then we can follow. I'm not seeing any virtual or live or whatever. So thank you. Next, under our quarterly reports, we have our OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits, and the FCC trust report.
As you know, or maybe you may not know, our investment advisors are PFM. And tonight I've invited Kathleen Walters of PFM, who's the director of multi-class assets, who also represents MATC. So I brought her to come in and join us. At your table, you should have the results of the the report for the quarter ending September 30th. And one of the things I would like to just quick mention, I don't know if everybody knows of the two trusts that we have. We have an OPEB trust, other post-employment benefits trust, and we also have an FCC trust. Do you have any questions related to those trusts?
Thank you very much for having me today. 2022 has been a heck of a year to be an investor in the market. The main story we're seeing in the markets is inflation. Inflation is driving just about every major concern, every policy issue. This time last year, there was broad hope that the inflation we were seeing that was starting to price in was a bit transitory. That has not proven to be the case. Inflation is very meaningful. It is persistent. There is some optimism, if you were tracking the markets today, that inflation may be plateauing, if not perhaps getting under control. The result of which is that the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, has had to increase interest rates quite substantially this year. And rising interest rates is very tough in just about every asset class in the market. 2022 was very unusual in that just about every asset class was perfectly correlated, unfortunately, to the negative. Generally speaking, when the stock market has a bad year like it is this year, fixed income does well, but that has not been the case. So while we think about setting up your portfolio for long-term success and diversifying in many asset classes, quite unfortunately, this year there was really no place to hide. The only asset class, there were a few exceptions, really cash. Had you liquidated your portfolio, held cash, it's the only place that has had positive return through September. So the report that was provided in your packets is a summary of the performance, breakdown of the different types of asset classes held by both the FCC Spectrum Trust and the OPEB Trust. Both of your portfolios are very highly diversified. We use ETFs and mutual funds, so they are exposures to hundreds, thousands of different stocks and bonds, both here in the US and internationally. We do some alternative investing in both portfolios, a little bit more in the FCC Spectrum Trust, which has a higher risk tolerance. Performance, again, unfortunately, is listed at the top right. You can see performance was negative. Every investor in the market, quite unfortunately, had negative performance through September 30th. There's slight underperformance versus your benchmark. That came in large part, due to some of our active managers. International equities had a very tough, has had a very tough go. Think about the geopolitical risks going on with Ukraine and Russia. So some of the investment managers were misplaced in what their expectations were for 2022. It's our role to monitor your portfolio, be as proactive as possible, and that is what we are doing. Some of the active managers that have underperformed, we've made a smaller portion of your overall portfolio. We have underweighted fixed income. Unfortunately, from a total return standpoint, as interest rates go up, it's not good for the total return of fixed income bonds. We know, and the Federal Reserve has made it very clear, that they have to continue to raise interest rates. They have to control inflation here in the US. So we have allocated slightly more to cash, as an example. You can see the cash allocation at the end of the quarter was about 3%. We are neutral at the moment to domestic and international stocks, which if the quarter we're in today is a good position to be. The stock market, as a couple hours ago when I checked, was up quarter to date about 10%. So it's a very good quarter so far. That is from September 30th to today. Unfortunately, given where everything was in 2022, we are still underweight in the stock market for the year. So that is the performance. The report also includes for you a cash flow listed at the bottom, so you can see the in dollar terms what this means. Sometimes it's hard to conceptualize what 2% or 4% returns are. So you can see because the FCC Spectrum Trust, as an example, which is the first page of the report, was funded in 2017, your long-term returns are still in the positive territory. So you're still up about 5% since the portfolio was funded, which works out to almost 23 million in investment income in return. Are there any questions or concerns?
Dr. Polich?
Would you just, for the benefit of some of our newer board members, explain what the real return and alternatives categories are?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this particular case, real return, we are counting in that asset class commodities. There was a small allocation to commodities. Commodities actually were an okay asset class until the third quarter. High demand, high inflation helped push that allocation and added some back into your portfolio. So real return, you can think of those assets as inflation hedging type assets, generally real return. The alternatives. Alternatives can mean many different things, to Director Foley's point. In this particular case, we are allocating in 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 increments to real assets, to private debt, and to private equity. And the difference there, private equity, so in the alternative space, they don't exchange on the major stock exchanges. So where you could go buy a share of Google, used to be able to buy Twitter, now you can't. Twitter would now be private equity, would be on the private side. So that's really the distinction between those asset classes. The alternatives are an interesting segment of the market. They're very common in higher ed portfolios. So you are in good company with your peers who allocate to these types of investments. They generally have smoother investment streams because they price less frequently. You could go out tomorrow and price what Disney traded at. You could look at the price today. Alternatives function slightly different. And that is why we think it adds value, but it is only the target for that particular sleeve. And the FCC Spectrum Trust is only 20%. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
I think he knew. He's helping me out.
I love questions. Happy to talk about any of these components.
I'm not seeing hands or people, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And now I'm ready to run.
Can't see my hands.
Oh, I can't see you. Yeah. Like you went away. There we go.
Okay, great. Here I am. So quick question, and this is just kind of a shot in the dark, but what effect does a businesses or multiple corporations or profit margins have? What effect does that have on inflation and for our purposes, how we're looking at things? Does that make sense?
Your question is, I'm guessing you're seeing that it's earnings season and companies are reporting, and you're curious what impact a U.S. corporation is on driving or controlling the inflation here in the U.S.?
Yes.
It's a really good question. Certainly, you could argue a very direct connection. Inflation is in the simplest terms, we as individuals spend more on a good than we did at any other time. So I did my grocery shopping for Thanksgiving this week. It was very noticeable that it cost a different amount than it did last year. That is inflation. So every company that has over the last few months or few quarters used this as an opportunity to increase their prices. It has over the period, for whatever reason, increased their prices. That does roll through into inflation measurements. Interestingly, if you look at the components of inflation, goods and services is a big sleeve. Another one is shelter, mortgages, housing prices. There's always a lot of conversations, especially in recessionary times, about housing. And housing has become much more expensive. There was high demand that pushed individual housing prices up. 30-year mortgages are now close to 7%. So the interest cost, the ability to purchase homes, is also driving inflation. So at a high level, I think the answer that to your question is that very directly, as every individual company starts charging more for the widgets and all the other items that they want to sell us for the holiday season, that is factoring into the inflation measurements we're seeing.
Thanks. I just as somebody who's a regular person that exists in the world, I keep hearing a lot of companies, it almost sounds whiny to me about how prices need to be higher so that they can stay afloat, etc. And then at the same time, I'm hearing that they're having record profits. and that they're increasing these prices on somebody who's just, getting up and going to work every day and living in, the regular world. And it's just difficult for me to kind of come to grips with that. And then these same individuals are talking about pointing the fingers in 6 or 7 other directions other than their profits. And it's frustrating to me as a regular person to kind of come to grips with that, like I said before.
Unfortunately, inflation is a very big concern and in many regards, and I think a topic that we will continue to talk about. I finally got over talking about COVID in the markets, and now I'm talking every quarter about inflation. Expectations are that inflation will exist through next year as well. Some of the goods and services we buy change prices very quickly. Energy, you can drive down the road, you can see the gas price per gallon. It could be something significantly different one day to the next. So those are very volatile asset classes. Other components of goods that we purchase can be much smoother. You generally sign a lease for, say, a year. So your housing prices are somewhat stickier. And if you sign your lease when prices are higher, that's going to stick around for a little while.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. And thanks for your patience with me, Madam Chair.
Problem. We're just trying to figure out, you keep disappearing and coming back. And so please speak up if you do have your hand up and we're not seeing it. That's not for lack of effort, like you just were on. So thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
Ready to move on to the annual reports. And the first one is the non-construction procurement report. And this is one of our requirements to the technical college system that we have this. And so I was calling on Laura Moore for this.
Oh, I was already here.
Yeah, you were. She was there. Wow, look up, there she is.
So I had already provided a written report and a video presentation for all of you. So what I'd like to do today is just go over the high points of that and answer any questions that you had. So I'll start with the part that was actually required by the WTCS. I look at all the vendors that we spent over $50,000 with last year and make sure that we did the proper competitive process and making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck for the colleges. And then we take a deeper dive. After that, I say, can we get even more cost savings somehow? Can we combine different vendors? Are we using 3 different vendors for, let's say, gloves? Can we put it all together, get some more leverage and get better pricing? So going through all that, I found 3 different services that I thought that we had some hidden cost savings. And that would be for printing, most specifically for PBS items, legal services, and parking. So that's not a really exciting report, but it is important that we do that to make sure that we can get them more money. And we just had a discussion about inflation. So this is very timely. And also, I just wanted to add that in addition to my going through and reviewing all of this, I then provide these numbers to the WTCS Purchasing Consortium, where they also go and try to put together all the different prices and purchases for all the colleges to see if we can combine them together and again, go out and do another competitive process and get savings for everyone all involved.
Yeah.
So can I ask a
Oh,
question
sure.
on this one? Okay, cool. Because I listened to your recording.
Okay.
And read the report. And both times I had the same question because it says below are vendors that require in-depth review to determine if competitive process should be used in the future in printing, legal services, and the parking. And like the parking one, I get the most just because of where we are and who we're purchasing parking from. I don't understand what's the deeper dive that you're gonna, because nowhere does it explain to me what that deeper dive is.
Oh.
And if so, are you looking at these, or you looked at them already and they're good? I was unclear from the presentations what that meant.
Okay, so I did take a deeper dive, and these are the ones that I say, I think that we could save some extra money.
I see, okay.
Okay, and then also just like for the printing, I can tell you, it was because we were using more than one vendor to do different projects and thought, why don't we put those together? But then I also have to talk to PBS and say, does this make sense? The type of printing that you require, would it make sense to put it together? I didn't know that part yet. So I'll still be doing a little bit more in-depth review of that.
Because I spent 25 years in the printing industry.
Okay.
the president of the college is smiling, she knows that. So in fact, I know this printer,
Okay,
in particular, and they're like in mass. So I also wondered, do we look at, it'd be great for us to be using a commercial printer who is in our district or at least in our surrounding area. So we are supporting our graduates, we're supporting, I know there isn't an apprenticeship program anymore, but we've trained a lot of apprentices who are out there working as journey people and I can tick off the companies if you'd like, but in printing businesses in our area. And so do we also take a look to see that we are trying to use and spend our money in our area?
yes.
Okay.
Whenever we do a bid or RFP, it has to be publicly posted.
Right.
But then also I ask all the initiators if they'll provide some vendors that we should directly solicit. I ask for at least 3, sometimes we get more. So that's when we really try to hit upon the local vendors.
Okay.
And I will tell you, maybe you'll be able to give me a little bit of insight. We've had some pretty bad luck with doing competitive processes for printing right now. It seemed that they were very hesitant to commit to pricing for a long term because of the volatility of paper pricing. So we tried doing shorter contract lane ranges, stuff like that. So that's why we're going to take another look at it as well. So.
And talk to me a little about legal services, because we have a very, very long relationship with Uncle Beth. And so we're looking at doing something different, or?
Well, we can only have contracts with a vendor up to 7 years. So we have to go out every 7 years.
Okay.
And we came to the end of that during COVID. Didn't really make sense at that time to do another contract. We spoke with the WTCS, they understood. So we do have to go out and do another competitive process for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So if you combine them, wouldn't that restrain you from hiring or like giving the contracts to hub vendors?
Not always, because sometimes we make multiple awards. For example, right now we're doing an RFP for temporary services, and we will most likely choose at least 3 or 4 different vendors. So we can, and then we can sometimes try to pick some that are just more like a niche type of thing, and then have the larger ones for the larger projects. Okay. So the second part of my presentation then was about non-construction certified hub spend. HUB stands for historically underutilized businesses, which includes minority, women, and service disabled veterans. So unlike the state, WTCS has not adopted a specific goal that you have to spend with hub vendors. But MATC, being who we are, said back in 2004, well, that's ridiculous. We want to be able to monitor that. We're going to respond to that. So we've been doing that, like I said, since 2004, providing that information to the board. So for a while, we kind of went, okay, is the 5% goal for the state enough? And we kind of waffled on what our goal would actually be. So then it was determined that we would say, you know what, we're not going to set just one goal where, sometimes you can be a little bit complacent when you reach that goal. We want to say every year we want to increase the spend that we did the year before by 10%. So last year we spent about $1.9 million. So this year's goal was 2.1 and we did 3.5. Now, caveat for that is we did spend a lot more money than we usually do because we had some CARES funds. So we actually also reported the percent of the overall spend, which also went from 6.7 to 9%. So much of this, so much of getting hub spend is communication and having everybody who's making the decisions on what they want to purchase, considering hub vendors. Because a lot of times people get used to using the same vendors all the time. So to get them to say, you know what, I'm willing to try someone else, just takes a lot of communication and education. And it has helped us definitely these last couple of years because of just what's happened in the world. And that everybody's kind of focusing on that. So we jumped on that train right away and we're trying to ride it as far as we can, because every year we look for different ways to make it and bring it to the forefront of everybody's minds. So one thing that we're doing different this year is we're also monitoring non-certified hub vendors, because a lot of times the non-certified vendors are smaller vendors and are, so women and everything. So we said, you know what, even though they're not certified, we still want to celebrate them. We still want to acknowledge them. So we started keeping track of those that were self-proclaimed hub vendors. And we realized that we spent an extra $500,000 with those vendors. So We're going to continue to kind of report them separately because we don't want to inflate the numbers for the numbers that we've been monitoring all these years. But I'm going to keep watching this and see what we can do. Because I feel like this $500,000, when I was reviewing this, a lot of that is more of our local vendors. So one small thing that we've done, and it doesn't seem like it would necessarily right away be part of purchasing, we had partnered with the HR to really streamline our independent contractor process. And so many of those are small vendors. So just to make sure that it's easy for them and they're not turned away by wanting to do stuff with us, because like, oh my gosh, I remember last time it was so difficult to do that independent contractor. Now it's going to be so streamlined. I'm so happy that we partnered with HR because it'll be wonderful for our vendors. So that being said, does anyone have any questions?
Do you guys participate with the governor's marketplace?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yep, we've done that for several years, even when it was all virtual. So, and we've had different people participate in that. And actually this year we really, rather than just sharing the information via email or talking to people, we actually set up meetings between different people within the college that we saw had historically used the kind of services with the vendors that we met, just to give them that face-to-face time. So it's all about planting seeds with this. You know, they may not need that vendor today, but they may remember it next year when they do need them.
Have you ever considered doing like an internal vendor fair so that we can bring them in and then people in the college can find out who those vendors are that?
I haven't done anything like that, no, but that would be a good idea to partner with our DEI, with Emma. I'll mention that to her. Because we have also partnered with WPI, where we'll give presentations on how to do business with MATC so they understand it's not that scary, that will help them out, and that we value their business.
And you use a database to search for vendors at all?
Yes, I actually have a form on the purchasing page on the MyMATC so that any initiator within the college can go and find different hub vendors through the DOA and several different certifying agencies. Sure.
And I just had a quick question. You said that we're only able to hold vendors for 7 years.
Mhm.
And then after the 7 years up, they can kind of rebid.
Yes.
As well, okay.
Yeah. We don't kick them to the curb. We give them the opportunity.
That was it.
Okay. Thank you.
And our next annual report is the construction services report, and Danielle.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you. So similar to the non-construction spend, you did receive board materials for the construction spend, specifically focused on the historically underutilized business spend for construction. So you did see that in your board materials, but to highlight what was in there, we had good news in the hub category this year. We did see some significant increases in our spend this past year for hub to the tune of 29.2% hub spend. So we have been challenged in years previously on our low bid environment and the rules that we're under for accepting the lowest responsible bidder. But this year we did see some fruit from the extra efforts we've been doing. We have held an open house for highlighting our hub goals and putting bid opportunities out there. We have held that twice now in January, and we are looking forward to holding another one at the Oak Creek campus this year. And we have also been closely following up with contractors that have put bids in under the low bid environment, and before the board does sign and approve the bids each month, we do follow up with any vendors that do, any contractors that do put a lower stated hub participation than the goal that we have been advertising. So we did increase that goal as well from 18% to 20% about a year and a half ago, and we are seeing the fruits of those efforts. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I'm not seeing or hearing any questions. Let you go back to your slides. Thank you very much. We're moving on to item 7, the board monitoring on the agenda. There are 2 items there. The first one is new program outcomes, and Dr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. So we shared the slide deck with you, and I'd like to maybe go over some highlights and maybe take any questions that you may have. As you can see, consistent with our mission and vision, we continue to offer education that transforms lives. We want to meet the needs of our community, the employers, the workforce as well. With that said, over the last 5 years, actually, we created 15 new programs. So on the average, you're looking at 5 programs. There was a dip during COVID, but we came right back and we continue to take our business here. I provided a list of programs to you, and we'll be glad to share any information relative to any specific program. But let me tell you quickly, in terms of outcomes, I mean, new programs give us the opportunity to provide new skill sets to our students to meet the employment needs. It creates growth in enrollments in many cases, and then it keeps us competitive. We just gonna need to stay on the cutting edge and so on. In many cases, it allows for new partnerships with our employers, with the community, also engagement for our students with student clubs and so on. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the bottom line is it's truly to give us that cutting edge, kind of advantage and to boost enrollments and to meet the workforce needs. That's the bottom line. I'll be glad to take any questions that you may have. Generally speaking, I'm sorry, we're seeing growth in practically every area except for one. And then for the most part, the programs that we created in 2022, we really have no data to compare it to. So it's too early for us to do that. But with the ones prior to that, we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing a lot of growth in practically all areas except for one. So any questions? Yes.
I appreciate, I hope my colleagues got to see the data that you sent us just to follow up.
Okay.
Because I was curious how we were doing in the different programs, and your explanation just helped me understand why some of them have like one enrollee.
Yep.
Because it's brand new and we don't have more enrollment or more information yet. So thanks for the follow-up.
You're welcome.
Any other follow-up questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I mean, this is based on maybe a huge lack of knowledge, but does it make sense to diversify and have more programs that are geared towards transfer, or does it not? And correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is transfer specific programs at MATC, I believe there's 2. There's associative science and associative arts transfer. And I think that is like the total sum of transfer programs. I guess the root of my question is if somebody has kind of an intention on what they like to transfer to, some people's majors when they go off to university might be like very high level math and specific science heavy, where others, even in an associates of science, will be, more science, almost no math. Does it make sense, and is it possible to expand the transfer programs or not?
So excellent question. Our focus is always employment, but transfer is always there for us. Every single time that we have a new program, we look for opportunities to articulate with the 4-year colleges. So that's always a goal of ours, because we really want to help the transfer students. In some cases, it makes sense. Other cases, it's like a terminal degree. I mean, you can transfer welding, for instance, but, certainly, if it goes into other areas and so on, that's always a goal of ours. So back to your question, the AA and the AS, the Associate of Arts and the Associate of Science, in addition to that, even our occupational programs, I mean, we have so many articulation agreements. We have, I think, close to 400. So we have so many of them. And like I said, every single time we create a new program, we look into articulation opportunities. And I can get specific, I can give you an example. Business management, absolutely. Business analyst goes right there. I mean, we're right there with UWM, other partners and so on. But the other ones, it depends on our goals and the transferability of the students. Now, as far as the technical skills and the math levels and so on, that again depends on the goal of the particular technical diploma or certificate. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense. Well, I'll be glad to go over the list with you if you'd like, and then we can go through the programs if you have any specific interest in one of them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just kind of, and that does answer. I guess I would ask, maybe this is a weird question. say for example, if somebody's interested in engineering.
Yep.
All of the STEM things, STEM specific things that I'm aware of at MATC, just based on like the outlines that I've looked at, they don't look like they would be a good option for transferring to actually go into that higher level of the STEM field. So an associative, like a general associative science transfer program would probably be the most suitable.
Yep.
Okay. Because that was kind of the basis of my question, because that program specifically has an allotment for, I believe, 5 math credits. I mean, you take calculus 1, you just used all of them. So.
Yeah, and good observation. And our programs, they're in many cases not algebra based or calculus based, as you may know, but they articulate in technical programs. But the STEM, it is our goal to get more in the actual engineering dynamic transfer degrees, but we're not there actually directly with the engineering programs.
I'm on your side.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, our last board monitoring is the fall to spring persistence plan that was also shared. This is one of the presidential goals, just as an FYI, and Juan Burrows will be here, although that wasn't in the video. It is you live though.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good evening, board chair, president, and board members. My name is Equan Burrows, and I do serve as your dean of the student experience here at MATC. And about a week ago, you received a set of PowerPoint slides and a video presentation from Dr. Jans, in which he provided a detailed description of many efforts, data gathering, and what's being done now to impact student persistence. Dr. Jans is unavailable to join us tonight, so again, I'm happy to offer a few highlights and take any questions that you may have. Some of those highlights include, but are not limited to, the most recent metrics of fall to spring persistence, spring to fall persistence, and fall to fall retention have all gone up in terms of student success. The cohort retention planning model is underway, and many retention strategies are being led by champions of those cohorts. The Holistic Coordinated Care Network is, just as it sounds, a network of several student service providers concentrating their care in a holistic manner. The network makes great use of EAB Navigate and other interactive communication tools in order to secure its objectives. The Holistic Student Health and Wellness Initiative is aligned with the MATC Transformation 2025 strategic plan. And this is a way for caring for the total student through holistic wellness. The proactive advising and caseload management efforts are aimed at anticipating barriers students face and remove them before they become too troublesome. This initiative also calls for each program student to be assigned an advisor immediately after registration, and every pathway advisor then have a caseload of students to serve. The Student Resource Center is a hub for student support, particularly but not exclusively for various insecurities such as food, housing, emotional health, technology, and the upcoming Career Closet, which we are very excited about our partnership with the Career Hub. And finally, academic retention strategies are provided in the setting of each academic and career pathway. Many active engagements reach out to our students in the home of their academic program to enhance student success. If you let me close my summary with the greatest thanks to having me today, and a happy Thanksgiving to you all. If you have any questions, I'm definitely willing to hear.
I just have one suggestion for you. I stumbled across a rather large group in Lake Park last summer, which were graduates of Bradley Tech and its predecessor organizations all the way back to Boys Tech. There are about 200 people there.
Okay.
You have a category here for high school / adult promise recipients, but it might, I don't know what the numbers are. You might consider whether people who went to Bradley Tech are a cohort that would have some cross-supporting applicability like the rest of these groups.
Understood. Thank you for that idea.
It's a very active one.
Here or in general?
in general. Activists, they've been active with MATC, yeah.
Okay. And you have STEM pathways on there twice, but
Wow.
it's an important point of emphasis.
It is. We had to double
Those
down on that.
tactics benefit from the last part of it.
Yeah.
We're all here for it.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so,
Understood. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, thank you. Next, do we have any new business? Dr. Baker?
So during our public comments, we heard, one of the childcare managers talk to us about 2 positions. It sounded like they were very important to the functioning of the childcare centers. Could we just get an update on that? I doesn't necessarily be a board item. The childcare centers and MATC are a personal passion of mine. And so I'd like to know if we're able to continue these positions or what.
Okay. Any other new business?
Oh, but I'll second what Director Baker said as well. Through my employment, I have the pleasure of working with Haley and Wendy from the Student Resource Center with some of the West Town Green students in housing. And it does seem like it's a very important fundamental for students to have access to a social worker on campus. So I would second getting additional information on how we can continue to fund that.
Okay. We'll look into that. Trying to make sure I'm not missing somebody here. Okay. Just some announcements and some of our future events, which have been already discussed, but our next board meeting here is December 13th on Tuesday, 4 o'clock here. And then that same week on that Friday, or excuse me, that following Sunday is the MATC winter commencement at 11 a.m. And then that following Tuesday is the GED HSED. So the date on your printed one is wrong, but as I verbally stated, it is December 20th. So look at previous communications sent to you from Gwen, and what I previously mentioned on the printed copy, the agenda has the wrong date on there. So just want to bring it up. In front of you also is an updated printed calendar. It has the graduation date on there. So anytime we have an update, so this is an updated calendar with that on there. So you might want to replace that with the one that you currently have. We also have some dashboard printouts in front of you as we continue to monitor those as part of our work and looking at that. Let's get together. With that being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
There we go. So we have a motion by Director Sitlali, or excuse me, I'm going to call you by your first name. And the second by Director Foley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned.